FromSoft is not a one-trick pony, though the internet so desperately wishes for them to be, to the point where they might actually pigeonhole themselves into becoming a one-trick pony. I think modern FromSoft fans behave similar to Atlas fans. Everyone's a Megami Tensei fan, except they didn't play anything before Persona 3 or Nocturne. With FromSoft, most modern fans never went further back than either Demon's Souls or Dark Souls, which is why I found it amusing when Armored Core 6 came out and people were disappointed that it didn't play like Dark Souls. So when FromSoft tries something new with Elden Ring Night Rain, the internet predictably responds with confusion. Is it a Battle Royale spin-off? Is it canon? Whatever kind of game it is doesn't really matter. It has the Elden Ring name attached, so it's guaranteed to sell millions, because this is where we're at with FromSoft and Bandai Namco. What we are witnessing here is full-blown degeneracy, because when it comes to business, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. And what better way to ensure sales than to piggyback off of Fanbases' goodwill? This is why the upcoming Turok is a co-op third-person shooter instead of a fast-paced first-person one. Even though this game bears zero resemblance to the old Turok games, the devs know what sells in today's market. What sells is Space Marine 2, so just repurpose that exact same game and slap a Turok skin on it. Now it's Turok. And these devs expect fans to eat it up because remember Turok? Same deal with that new Perfect Dark game that looks nothing like Perfect Dark. This right here is why video games are in such a pathetic state, because if you don't leech off established fan bases, you get Concord, a $400 million flop. But if Concord used an established IP like, say, Marvel, and was functionally the exact same product, it'd be a smash hit. Oh, look at that! If Elden Ring Night Rain had nothing to do with Elden Ring and was just called Night Rain, what would be the appeal? It'd be just another dime a dozen procedurally generated co-op game, except that would be better than what we're getting, because by being an Elden Ring spin-off, it's now an asset flip. Studios love to make games like Night Rain because it's easy, guaranteed money, and you'd hope that the devs use that revenue to produce genuine passion products. Shift Up did just that with Stellar Blade. They used the funding from a gacha to make a fun little action game. It's likely that Night Rain is fulfilling a similar purpose. Most developers no longer produce games that they themselves want to play. When did this happen? The minute development companies became publicly traded. I recorded a 40-minute video discussing how Platinum Games has struggled with finances since their inception, and I tossed most of it out because when I reflected on the points I made, I realized something. I was berating Platinum Games from a business perspective, when really, the situation is too complicated to pick a side. In the beginning, Platinum latched onto Sega with a 4-game contract with a singular goal in mind: just survive for the first 5 years. Most startups fail within 5 years, so Platinum's mentality was to do whatever it took to survive, which meant taking a bad deal with Sega where they wouldn't own any of their IPs. Their first game was a passion project called Mad World. It flopped so hard that Sega refused to publish any more mature-rated games on the Wii. Their second game was Infinite Space, another titanic flop because, well, you try selling the public on a slow-paced sci-fi visual novel strategy game with no voice acting. So with 2 flops under the company's belt, and Bayonetta, which didn't meet sales expectations, Shinji Mikami began pitching ideas at Sega, and they shot most of them down. Sega didn't want a medium-sized game in a niche genre, they wanted a blockbuster hit. I highly recommend this interview with Mikami, where he talks about his experience developing games, because it gives such a fascinating insight into how developers can't make the games they want to make. Everything is a compromise. The entire industry is held together with dental floss and scotch tape, and it's remarkable that it survived until this point. If game directors had any integrity at all, no video game would ever be produced. Anyway, after Mikami directed Vanquish, he left Platinum Games, despite being a co-founder, because he gave up on being able to direct whatever he wanted. When you rely on outside funding, you are beholden to the whims of the publisher. He founded Tango Gameworks so he could instead mentor a new generation of developers. Too bad the company was acquired by ZeniMax and subsequently Microsoft and was then shut down.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Thus sparked the second era of Platinum, licensed garbage published by Activision. How bad was this era? Every one of these games is delisted. They also made Metal Gear Rising around this time, and while the game is praised nowadays, at the time it wasn't a hit. Most Metal Gear fans were pissed that Kojima's team dropped development and passed the game to a different studio, and people were complaining that the game was too short. This was around the time when players were praising games with endless cutscenes and zero replay value, like Bioshock Infinite, so a 5-hour-long game wasn't gonna fly anymore. As the years passed, Platinum continued to work on a hybrid between passion projects and licensed titles, never making a smash hit until Square Enix stepped into the frame. Turns out if you take Bayonetta and zoom in on the ass just a little bit more, you get a game that sells 9 million copies. And since Platinum has never and will never make a game that successful again, they turned to live service trash like Babylon's Fall to rake in the dough. That was promptly delisted alongside World of Demons, which was originally a free-to-play mobile game that lasted a few months before it was pulled from the App Store, only to be re-released years later on Apple Arcade and then delisted again. That marks 5 games from Platinum that were delisted, by the way. Kamiya, upset that The Wonderful 101 is the only game in recorded history to flop twice, and Soul Cresta sold a grand total of 10 copies, decided that Platinum was the problem, so he jumped ship to revive Clover Studio, presumably despite Platinum's current CEO, who was previously the CEO of Clover Studio. And it was around this point where I gave up on my last video because I defended Platinum's actions from a business perspective. If you were the CEO of this company, and your job is on the line, can you continue to let Kamiya make games like Soul Cresta? It doesn't matter how good the game is, what matters is if it sells. Soul Cresta didn't sell. Can you let this guy continue making games like that? The same situation happened with Shinji Mikami. He wanted to make a smaller sized game called The Witch and the Piglet, and Sega hated the idea. It's a hard sell, and Platinum was not in a position to release another niche game that wouldn't sell. Look what happened to Infinite Space. Even Vanquish itself was a concession. What we got wasn't the original vision. It was supposed to play like Dynasty Warriors but with robots, except Mikami wanted to prioritize visual quality, and because consoles are terrible for the industry because they impose countless restrictions, Mikami had to scale the game down to a more linear experience. So I do sympathize with Platinum. They're trying to make the best of a bad situation. They have developers eager to try new things, but they are beholden to the market, and these games just don't generate enough revenue to survive. It's easy to take Kamiya's side and go against Platinum, and believe that creativity should be king, but these companies are playing a numbers game. They're aiming for the lowest common denominator. Look at Kamiya's first project at Clover's, a sequel to Okami. Even with his new studio, he's banking on an established IP. He wouldn't receive funding otherwise. Kamiya doesn't have a track record of blockbuster hits for publishers to gamble on him making something new. For all the hate and vitriol publishers receive, they're giving fans what they want. They're trying to placate as many people as possible. Would it make business sense to make something players would hate? Games like Elden Ring Night Rain are being made because Elden Ring sells, because procedurally generated games sell, and because co-op games sell. The gaming public likes these kinds of games. They will play this. From my perspective, this is a lazy, blatant asset flip, but who cares about my perspective? Night Rain wouldn't be made if Bandai Namco didn't believe it would make easy money, which is why I place the blame on the players. Players are fickle. One day they chastise Concord for being an insipid hero shooter, the next they're playing Marvel Rivals with 250,000 concurrent players. One day they happily eat up The Last of Us 2, the next they crucify Naughty Dog for making more of the same, except set in space. They slam Rockstar for charging $50 for a Red Dead Redemption port, then buy it anyway. They get pissed at Helldivers 2 for requiring a PSN account link, but where was that outrage when Red Dead required a Rockstar account, or Doom Eternal a Bethesda account, or Street Fighter 6 a Capcom account? One day something is a big deal, the next it's not. It's okay for one company to behave a certain way, but not others. DRM is a big deal, yet Steam thrives, and comparatively few people use GOG, where games are DRM free. Is this hobby even about the games anymore? Or is it about being part of a community, part of a fan base? Because I'll tell you, in the process of making a few dozen YouTube videos, I've inadvertently poked at a number of hornets' nests, and I'll be frank, fan bases are the last communities I want to have any discussions with. I'm just some asshole sharing his opinions, and I can't believe people need this spelled out for them. Didn't you learn how to separate fact from opinion in elementary school? Why do you need to be reminded of this? Why do I need to preface statements with "in my opinion"? Here's a fact. fan bases can be so insufferable that the community members themselves can't stand each other. The only thing a Hollow Knight fan hates more than someone criticizing his favorite game are other Hollow Knight fans complaining about Silksong. I'm not even sure what kind of mental gymnastics need to be employed to justify this game taking over half a decade to release when it looks identical to Hollow Knight, but I'm sure there's some fan out in the void that's all too eager to explain how it has the most complex battle system known to man, and how 3 dudes are making it on a shoestring budget in a basement somewhere in rural Australia. Whatever the case, I'm sure Silksong will be a masterpiece. That ought to throw you off my scent. I talk about games whether I have positive thoughts to share or not, because I enjoy talking about games. I don't want developers to listen to me or anyone else for that matter. And rest assured, there's not a single developer out there that's going to be influenced by what anyone on YouTube has to say. And I wouldn't want them to be influenced anyway. A developer should only ask one question when they're making a game. Is this something he himself would want to play? That's it. That's the only question that should ever be asked. Because if a dev doesn't like the game he's working on, what's the point of any of this? God Hand is appreciated to this day because you can play the game for 2 minutes and immediately tell that it's a passion project. Whether you like the game or not is irrelevant. You can't deny that it's made to appeal to a specific audience and not as many people as possible. It's made from the heart, and for the people that it clicks with, they're gonna love it. That's why people have an appreciation for indie games. They're made by passionate dudes in their free time. There was a time when you didn't need to look at the indie scene for games that oozed passion, but gaming has gotten too popular for its own good. I've heard the term gatekeeping thrown around as a pejorative, but I don't view it that way. The consequences of gaming becoming mainstream have been catastrophic for the hobby. People that used to look down on this hobby and call people nerds now proudly consider themselves part of the pack because it's a cool thing to do. It's en vogue. Now we're flooded with nerd posers. These are the same people that refuse to touch Persona 1 and 2 because they're too old school. These are the same people that praise the Resident Evil 4 remake for modernizing its control scheme, that called Astrobot Game of the Year, when if it released 20 years ago, when we got a half dozen amazing platformers every year, it would have been instantaneously forgotten. It couldn't wear Mario Sunshine's jockstrap. So I 100% support gatekeeping. It's the only way to ensure quality. Look at Hollywood. Bill Murray was staunchly against making a third Ghostbusters, then when Harold Ramis died and a new entry could finally be made, look what happened. Look at this disaster.
Well, I would love to see that, I really would.
Bob Gale will not allow a new Back to the Future to be made because he wants to preserve the original trilogy. Why taint it with a new entry that will be written and directed by people that won't respect the source material? Hollywood wants to make sequels and remakes not to make fans happy, but because they're easier sells than new ideas. It's always been about the money, and it always will be. Sequels and spin-offs and remakes are not inherently bad, but they need to come from the heart. That's why the first Resident Evil remake worked. Mikami wanted to improve upon his original vision. It's hard to muster any enthusiasm for sequels being produced by people that weren't responsible for the original games that I love. Why should I care that BioWare made a new Dragon Age when none of the project leaders of the original game are still at the company? How is this anything more than officially sanctioned fanfiction? If there's anything to take away from this, it's that developers are making games that the market wants to buy. Hero shooters and battle royales are popular, so they keep being produced. Madden and FIFA get yearly entries for $70 because millions of people will buy them no matter what. And for all the gaming is dying sentiments being shared online, gaming remains more profitable than ever before. So what does that say about the industry? Is gaming even about playing quality games anymore? Or is it about being part of a community? Do you even like the game you're playing? Or are you just echoing the sentiment of your beloved fanbase? I've been a Monster Hunter fan since Freedom Unite, but I didn't care for World. But World brought in millions of new fans that hail it as the second coming of Christ, so I don't engage with the community. I keep to myself and enjoy the entries that appeal to me. I think there are a lot of silent fans in the world that don't enjoy being part of large fan bases, and I sympathize with them. Whether you belong to a large community, a niche community, or none at all, the important thing to always keep in mind is that you think for yourself. You'll be a lot happier if you decide for yourself what it is you like, rather than leaving that decision to the whims of others. Your time is precious, so don't waste it. Or do, the choice is yours.